Montana Territory, 1875. The spring rains had come early, washing away winter's grip, but leaving behind a muddy desolation that mirrored Owen Galloway's soul. At 25, he'd already seen enough death to last several lifetimes. The war between the states had taken his father and brother, and the unforgiving frontier had claimed his mother to fever just last autumn. Owen shifted in his saddle, adjusting the brim of his hat against the drizzle. The vast grasslands stretched before him, broken only by distant mountains still capped with snow. His ranch, or what remained of it, lay 5 miles behind him. Once, the Double G had been his family's pride. Now it was just him, 3 hired hands, and too many memories. No sense in dwelling, he muttered to his horse, a sturdy buckskin gelding named Chief. The frontier's no place for sentiment, just survival. That had become his creed in recent years. The Montana Territory demanded strength, not softness. Love was a luxury that got people killed out here, where a man's next breath wasn't guaranteed against outlaws, elements, or the occasional hostile tribe protecting their ancestral lands. Owen had convinced himself that loneliness was preferable to loss. Better to face the frontier alone than to watch another loved one die. His hired hands provided all the company he needed. Enough conversation to keep from going mad, but no attachments that would tear him apart when inevitably severed. What he wanted was simple: to rebuild the Double G, make it profitable, and prove that a Galloway could tame this wild country. That would honor his father's memory better than any tears or sentiment ever could. Yet on nights when the prairie winds howled like lost souls, Owen sometimes wondered if there wasn't something missing, something more than cattle and land and survival. But such thoughts were dangerous indulgences, and he would push them away by morning light. As the afternoon waned, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. Owen had been tracking strays for hours, and the coming storm suggested he should head back. But something, intuition perhaps, urged him toward the creek that marked the eastern boundary of his property. The rain intensified, drumming against his oilskin coat as thunder rolled across the valley. Chief snorted nervously beneath him. "Easy boy," Owen soothed. "We'll find shelter soon enough." That's when he heard it, a sound so out of place it stopped him cold. A woman's sob, carried on the wind. Owen dismounted, leading Chief toward the source of the sound. Through a stand of cottonwoods, he spotted a broken-down wagon tilted precariously near the swollen creek. A young woman huddled beneath it, her pale blue dress sodden, her shoulders shaking with each sob. She couldn't have been more than 20, with honey-blonde hair escaping from what had once been an elegant updo. Now it hung in wet tendrils around a face that, despite being streaked with tears and mud, possessed a striking beauty that caught Owen off guard. For a moment, he considered riding away. A woman alone meant complications, and complications meant vulnerability. But something in her desperation reached past his carefully constructed walls. "Miss," he called, approaching slowly. "Are you hurt?" She startled, scrambling back against the wagon wheel, fear flashing across her face before giving way to wary relief at the sight of his clean-shaven face and ranch clothes. "My uncle," she managed between hiccuping sobs. "The creek. We were crossing, the wagon." He was swept away. Owen's gaze darted to the rushing water, now running high and fast with the rain. If someone had been caught in that current, the chances weren't good. "How long ago?" he asked, already removing his coat. "Perhaps an hour," she whispered, her voice hollow. "I've been calling for him, but—" Her green eyes met his, filled with a desperate hope he knew was misplaced. But he couldn't bring himself to extinguish it outright. "I'll look downstream," he said. "You stay here under the wagon, out of the rain." "He was all I had left," she whispered. "I'm all alone now." Something in those words struck Owen like a physical blow. Before he could think better of it, he knelt beside her, meeting her gaze directly. "You're not alone anymore," he said with quiet certainty. "I'm Owen Galloway of the Double G Ranch. And whoever you are, miss, you'll never be alone again while I draw breath. That's a promise." Her eyes widened at his declaration, one that had surprised him as much as her. In that moment, as rain poured around them and the creek surged with spring runoff, Owen recognized he'd just made a commitment that flew in the face of everything he believed about survival on the frontier. "Grace," she said softly. "Grace Kincaid." The search for Grace's uncle, Horace Kincaid, proved fruitless. Owen rode 2 miles downstream before the gathering darkness forced him to return to the wagon. The elderly man had been swept away while trying to guide their team across the usually placid creek, swollen now from the unusually heavy spring rains. Grace sat exactly where he'd left her, eyes vacant with shock. Her traveling case, the only possession salvaged from the wagon, rested beside her. "Miss Kincaid," Owen said gently. "Night's coming. My ranch is 5 miles from here. We need to go before the storm worsens." "I can't leave," she protested weakly. "What if your uncle managed to make it to shore, he'd seek shelter, not return in this weather," Owen reasoned. "Come morning, I'll organize a proper search party." Grace was 22. She later told him as they rode double on Chief toward the Double G. She and her uncle had been traveling from St. Louis after losing the family dry goods business to fire. They'd planned to start anew in Helena, where a distant cousin had offered Horace a partnership in a mercantile. "I've never been so far west," she admitted, her body tense against his as she perched sideways in front of him on the saddle. "Uncle Horace said Montana would be our fresh start. After losing my parents to influenza last year, there was nothing left for us back east." Owen felt her words resonate in his chest. They were both orphans of circumstance, clinging to scraps of family and hope. The ranch house came into view as lightning illuminated the valley, a sturdy 2-story structure of logged pine with a wide porch and stone chimney. Smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth within. Mrs. Abernathy, the widow who kept house for Owen, took one look at Grace's bedraggled state and sprang into action, shooing Owen away while she attended to the young woman's needs. Later, after Grace had been bathed, fed, and settled into the guest room that had once belonged to Owen's mother, Mrs. Abernathy cornered him in the kitchen. "That poor child has the look of someone who's lost everything," she said, her weathered hands busy with kneading dough for tomorrow's bread. "What do you plan to do with her, Mr. Galloway?" Owen stared into his coffee cup. "Find her uncle if he's alive to be found. If not," he trailed off, unwilling to voice what they both suspected. "And then," Mrs. Abernathy pressed, "then I'll see she gets safely to Helena, to her cousin," he said firmly, though something in his chest tightened at the thought. A ranch is no place for a city woman alone. Mrs. Abernathy gave him a knowing look that made him uncomfortable. Sometimes fate has other plans than those we make for ourselves. Owen dismissed her words with a grunt. But that night, lying awake as the storm raged outside, he couldn't shake the image of Grace's tear-stained face or the impulsive promise he'd made. "You'll never be alone again." What madness had possessed him to say such a thing? The search party found Horace Kincaid's body the following day, 3 miles downstream, caught in a tangle of driftwood. Owen broke the news to Grace himself, watching as the last of her hope crumbled into grief. "I've sent word to Helena," he told her as they stood on the porch that evening, the setting sun painting the clouds in shades of fire. "To your cousin. Once we receive a reply, I'll escort you there myself." Grace nodded absently, her gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "He wanted so badly to see the West," she murmured. "Said it was a place where a person could reinvent themselves." "It can be," Owen agreed. "But it's also unforgiving to those who aren't prepared." "And are you prepared, Mr. Galloway?" she asked, turning those remarkable green eyes on him. "Or are you simply surviving?" The question struck too close to truths he preferred not to examine. "Surviving is enough out here," he replied stiffly. "Is it?" Her voice was soft, but somehow penetrating. "My father used to say that merely existing wasn't living. That without connection to others, a person was just occupying space." "Your father didn't live in Montana territory," Owen said more harshly than he intended. "Out here, connections are weaknesses that can get you killed." Grace didn't flinch at his tone. Instead, she studied him with a perception that made him uncomfortable. "Someone hurt you," she observed. "Someone you loved." "Everyone I've ever loved is dead," he said flatly. "That's lesson enough." Before she could respond, he turned on his heel and walked away, unwilling to continue a conversation that threatened the carefully constructed barriers around his heart. Days stretched into a week as they waited for word from Helena. Spring took firm hold of the land, transforming the mud to vibrant green grass scattered with wildflowers. Owen found himself watching Grace as she adapted to ranch life with surprising resilience. She insisted on helping Mrs. Abernathy with household tasks, learning to cook on a wood stove and manage the endless laundry that 4 men generated. Her city manners gradually softened. Her laugh came more frequently, and Owen caught himself seeking excuses to be near the house during the day rather than out with the cattle. "She's good for this place," Jim Thornton, his foreman, remarked one afternoon as they mended fence together. "Brings a certain light that's been missing." Owen grunted noncommittally, though he couldn't deny the truth of it. The Double G had felt more like a home in the past week than it had since his mother died. 10 days after Grace's arrival, Owen took her to town to purchase necessities and check for mail. Helena was still nearly a week's journey away, but the small settlement of Pine Creek could provide basic supplies and served as their postal connection. Grace wore a simple dress of forest green that Mrs. Abernathy had altered from one of his mother's old gowns. With her honey blonde hair braided and pinned beneath a modest bonnet, she looked as though she belonged to this place, a thought that troubled Owen more than it should have. "No letter from Helena yet," the postmaster informed them. "But got something here for you, Owen." Came special courier from Bozeman. The envelope bore the seal of the territorial marshal's office. Owen frowned as he broke it open, scanning the contents quickly. His expression darkened. "Bad news?" Grace asked as they walked toward the general store. "Nothing that concerns you," he said shortly, folding the letter away. "Just business." But it did concern her, indirectly. The letter warned that Jasper Harding and his gang had been spotted heading toward Pine Creek. Harding had a personal vendetta against Owen, who testified against his brother 3 years prior, sending him to prison where he'd eventually died of tuberculosis. "I'm coming for what's yours, Galloway," had been Harding's promise at the trial. "Everything you love." At the time, Owen had nothing left to love. Now, as he glanced at Grace examining fabric in the store, a cold fear settled in his stomach. He needed to get her to Helena as soon as possible, away from the danger that his past was bringing to his doorstep. That evening, as Grace sat on the porch step watching the sunset, Owen joined her with 2 cups of coffee. "There's a cattle buyer heading to Helena the day after tomorrow," he said without preamble. "I've arranged for you to travel with his party. They'll see you safely to your cousin." Grace's face registered surprise, then hurt. "You're that eager to be rid of me?" "It's not that," he said, struggling to find words that wouldn't reveal too much. "It's just, this isn't the life you're accustomed to. Your cousin can provide better. Perhaps I should decide what life I'm suited for," she replied, a spark of defiance in her eyes. "I'm not a child, Mr. Galloway, despite what you may think. I've buried both parents and now my uncle. I understand hardship. Eastern hardship and frontier hardship are different beasts," he insisted. "And you presume to know what I can handle." She set her coffee aside, turning to face him fully. "In the short time I've been here, I've learned to build a fire, helped birth a calf, and even shot that revolver you keep by the door. Quite accurately, I might add, thanks to Mrs. Abernathy's instruction." Owen blinked in surprise. "Mrs. Abernathy taught you to shoot?" Grace's chin lifted. "She said a woman alone needs to defend herself." "I agree. You won't be alone in Helena," he reminded her, though the words tasted bitter. "No," she conceded, her voice softening. "But I won't have this either." Her gesture encompassed the ranch, the sunset, the distant mountains, and him, he realized with a jolt. "Grace," he began, uncertain what he meant to say. She stood abruptly. "Thank you for the coffee, Mr. Galloway. I should help Mrs. Abernathy with supper." As she disappeared into the house, Owen was left with the unsettling realization that sending Grace away for her own safety might hurt worse than anything Jasper Harding could inflict on him. The following day brought unexpected complications. The afternoon stage arrived carrying a letter from Helena, not from Grace's cousin, but from his widow. The cousin had died of pneumonia 2 weeks prior. "He was my last connection," Grace said numbly as they sat in Owen's study. "I have nowhere to go now." "You could still go to Helena," Owen suggested. "It's a growing town. With your experience in your father's store, you might find work in a shop, or perhaps as a schoolteacher." "Alone?" Her voice wavered. "In a town where I know no one." Owen's promise echoed between them. "You'll never be alone again while I draw breath." Before he could respond, Jim burst into the room without knocking. "Riders coming," he announced grimly. 6 of them armed. "It's Harding." Owen's blood ran cold. "Get Grace to the root cellar," he ordered. "Mrs. Abernathy knows what to do." "I'm not hiding in a cellar," Grace protested. This isn't a discussion, Owen snapped. These men are killers, Grace. They're here for me, but they won't hesitate to hurt anyone in their path. Then I should be able to help defend the house, she insisted. Grace, please. His voice softened as he took her hands in his. I can't focus on what needs doing if I'm worried about you. Please go with Mrs. Abernathy. Something in his expression must have conveyed the gravity of the situation, for she nodded reluctantly and allowed the housekeeper to lead her away. Owen and his men positioned themselves strategically around the ranch house. They were outnumbered, but had the advantage of familiar ground and defensive positions. Jasper Harding halted his men 50 yards from the house. He was a tall man with a scarred face and cold eyes that revealed nothing of the soul within, if he possessed one at all. Galloway, he called. Come out and face me like a man. Owen stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, but pointed downward. Your quarrels with me, Harding. Let's keep it that way. Harding's laugh was as empty as his eyes. My brother died in chains because of you. I aim to take everything you value before I kill you. Your brother robbed a stagecoach and shot the driver. Owen replied evenly. I just told the truth about what I saw. And the truth got him dead, Harding snarled. Now I hear you've got a pretty new piece living here. Maybe I'll start with her. Ice formed in Owen's veins. There's no woman here, he lied. Just me and my hands. That's not what they're saying in town, Harding's second-in-command called. Blonde girl, green eyes. Been staying here near 2 weeks. Owen cursed inwardly. Of course their trip to Pine Creek hadn't gone unnoticed. Last chance, Galloway, Harding warned. Come peaceful. Tell us where the girl is, and we'll make it quick for you. Go to hell, Owen replied, raising his rifle as he dove for cover. The gunfight erupted like summer lightning, sudden and violent. Bullets splintered wood and shattered windows as Harding's men spread out to surround the house. Owen and his hands returned fire from protected positions, but they were pinned down and outnumbered. When a lull came in the shooting, Owen heard Harding call out again. We can do this all day, Galloway. Or you can send out the girl, and we'll call it square. The mere suggestion filled Owen with murderous rage. That's never happening, Harding. Then you'll watch this place burn before you die, came the cold reply. Owen's blood turned to ice as he saw one of Harding's men approaching the barn with a torch. The spring had been dry after the early rains, and the wooden structures would catch quickly. A shot rang out from the house, not from Owen or his men, and the outlaw with the torch dropped, clutching his shoulder. Owen turned to see Grace at an upstairs window, his mother's old Winchester in her hands, determination etched on her face. Their eyes met for a brief moment before she ducked back from the window, moving to another position as Harding's men fired at the spot where she'd been. Pride and fear warred in Owen's chest. Pride for her courage, fear for her safety. He had to end this, and quickly. Jim, he called to his foreman. Cover me. I'm going to work around behind them. Using the chaos Grace had created as distraction, Owen slipped out the back door and moved through the trees that flanked the house. Years of hunting had taught him to move silently, and the outlaw's attention was fixed on the main buildings. He managed to position himself behind Harding and his remaining men, who had clustered behind an overturned wagon. With steady hands, he took aim and called out, Drop your weapons or die where you stand. Harding whirled, bringing up his pistol, but Owen's rifle cracked first. The outlaw leader fell, a look of surprise frozen on his face. The remaining men, seeing their boss down, quickly surrendered. By nightfall, the surviving outlaws were securely tied in the barn, awaiting the arrival of the territorial marshal who'd been summoned via a rider to Pine Creek. Harding was dead, along with one of his men. On Owen's side, Jim had taken a bullet in the arm, but would recover. Owen found Grace sitting alone on the porch, still clutching the Winchester across her lap. Her face was pale but composed. You could have been killed, he said quietly, sitting beside her. So could you, she replied. I made a choice. You're not what I expected, Owen admitted. When I found you by that creek, I thought you were just another eastern flower that would wilt in Montana's harsh climate. A small smile touched her lips. Perhaps I'm hardier stock than I appear. Perhaps you are, he agreed, his voice rough with emotion. Grace, about Helena. I'm not going, she interrupted firmly. Not unless you truly want me gone. The words hung between them, weighted with possibilities neither had dared voice until now. I don't want you gone, Owen said finally. but I'm afraid to want you to stay." Grace set the rifle aside and turned to face him fully. "Why?" "Because everyone I've ever loved has been taken from me," he admitted, the words torn from somewhere deep. "And today, when Harding threatened you, I realized I couldn't bear to lose you too." "So your solution is to send me away before that can happen?" She shook her head. "Owen, that's not living, that's hiding." "Maybe," he conceded, "but it's kept me alive." "Alive, but alone," she said softly. "Is that really what you want?" The question penetrated the armor he'd built around his heart. Was survival alone worth the cost of never truly living? "No," he whispered. "It's not what I want. Not anymore." Grace's hand found his, warm and certain. "When you found me by that creek and promised I wouldn't be alone again, something changed for me. For the first time since my parents died, I felt safe. Not because the danger was gone, but because I wasn't facing it alone." Owen looked down at their intertwined fingers. "I meant what I said that day, though I didn't fully understand it then. You've brought something back to this place, Grace. Something I thought was gone forever." "Hope," she supplied. "More than that," he said, meeting her gaze. "Life. Real life, not just survival." In the soft evening light, with the scent of pine and sage on the breeze, Owen Galloway did something he'd sworn never to do again. He opened his heart to possibility. "Stay," he said simply. "Not as my guest or my responsibility, but because this is where you choose to be. Because this could be your home too." Grace's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Are you asking what I think you're asking, Mr. Galloway?" "I'm asking improperly and too soon," he admitted with a small laugh. "But yes, Miss Kincaid, I believe I am. Not today or tomorrow, but someday, when you're ready. I'd like to make that promise I made by the creek permanent." Her smile was like sunrise after the longest night. "I think I'd like that very much." 3 months later, on a perfect summer day, Owen and Grace were married in the small church in Pine Creek. The ranch hands had built them a new house just beyond the old one, a symbol of their fresh start while honoring the past that had brought them together. The Double G flourished under their joint care. Grace's head for business complemented Owen's ranching knowledge, and together they expanded operations to include breeding horses as well as cattle. A year to the day after he'd found her crying in the rain, Owen presented Grace with a special gift, the deed to the ranch, rewritten to include her name alongside his. "The Double G was my father's legacy," he told her as they stood on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. "But its future is ours to shape together." Grace leaned into his embrace, her hand resting protectively over the gentle swell of her belly where their child grew. "From the moment you found me, you kept your promise," she murmured. "I've never been alone again." Owen kissed her tenderly, marveling at how much had changed in a single year. The man who had believed love was a weakness had discovered it was his greatest strength. The frontier that had seemed to demand isolation now felt rich with possibility and connection. "Neither of us will ever be alone again," he promised, his hand joining hers over their growing child. "That's the truest thing I know." As twilight deepened around the Double G ranch, Owen Galloway finally understood what his father had tried to teach him long ago. The frontier wasn't meant to be conquered alone. Its true treasure wasn't in the land or cattle or gold that men fought over, but in finding someone to share its beauty and bear its hardships alongside you. In Grace, he had found not just a wife, but a partner for the journey ahead, whatever storms might come.